Jax's revenge domain. The email arrived at 4:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Performance improvement plan. Confidential review required. After 22 years of safety awards and 0 incidents, I was being put on a formal PIP, the corporate kiss of death. I stared at the screen, reading the accusations. Resistance to modernization initiatives, territorial behavior regarding departmental changes, inability to adapt to new leadership paradigms. My name is Howard Brennan, but everyone at Apex Manufacturing calls me Hank. I'm 48 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had job security. I'd built our industrial safety equipment operation from 50 employees to 350, established protocols that kept our workers alive, and maintained relationships with clients who trusted our equipment with their lives. Now some 26-year-old MBA was trying to push me into early retirement. Let me back up and tell you how this mess started. It began when Ashley Crawford walked into my shop floor like she owned the place, her $3,000 suit completely out of place among the heavy machinery and steel beams. Harvard MBA, fresh from McKinsey Consulting, with a handshake that felt like grabbing a cold fish. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet our new VP of Strategic Operations," announced Roger Martinez, our CEO, gesturing toward Ashley like she was some kind of miracle worker. "Ashley will be implementing efficiency improvements across all departments. Hank will be transitioning to support her initiatives. Support her initiatives, corporate speak, for you're being demoted." The shop went quiet. Tony Rodriguez, our foreman who'd worked beside me for 15 years, looked like someone had just told him his truck got repossessed. Brad Coleman, my manufacturing supervisor, stared at his steel-toed boots. These guys had trusted me to keep this place running right, and now they were watching me get benched by someone who probably couldn't tell a torque wrench from a tire iron. "We need to modernize our processes," Roger continued, his hand on Ashley's shoulder like she was his favorite daughter. "Ashley brings fresh perspective from McKinsey. She'll help us eliminate inefficiencies while Hank provides historical context." Historical context. That's what they call you when they're putting you out to pasture. Ashley surveyed the shop floor with the cold efficiency of an auctioneer appraising estate sale items. Her eyes landed on my office, the one with windows overlooking the main production line, where I could see everything that mattered. "That office will work perfectly for our efficiency task force," she said, pointing through the glass walls where my safety certifications and client appreciation letters covered every available wall space. "Hank, there's a perfectly adequate workspace near the loading dock. You can relocate there this afternoon." Perfectly adequate, like a closet with a window. "The transition should be seamless," she continued, already mentally rearranging my life's work. "We're bringing in some McKinsey consultants who'll need centralized space for workflow optimization." I watched 22 years of relationship building get reduced to workflow optimization in a single sentence. "Understood," I said, keeping my voice level even though I wanted to tell her exactly where she could optimize her efficiency initiatives. 2 hours later, I was watching maintenance guys haul my industry safety awards in a cardboard box, while Ashley directed the installation of whiteboards covered in flowcharts that looked like circuit diagrams designed by someone who'd never seen actual manufacturing. The oak desk my crew had presented me after we won the Regional Safety Excellence Award got replaced with some glass and chrome contraption that belonged in a tech startup, not a machine shop. My new workspace had a wobbly chair that squeaked every time I moved, and a computer that took 5 minutes just to boot up. The loading dock was 20 feet away, so every conversation got interrupted by the beep of forklifts and the crash of shipping pallets. When my phone rang an hour later, it was Brad calling from 50 feet away. "Hank, sorry, but Ashley called a department meeting in conference room B." "When's it start?" It started 10 minutes ago. She said it was just for operational department heads. I was being excluded from meetings about my own operation." "No problem," I lied, though we both knew it was a big problem. After hanging up, I found an email from Ashley to the entire plant. "Operational Efficiency Initiative, Moving Beyond Legacy Limitations." The subject line alone made my blood pressure spike. The attachment was a 22-page PowerPoint presentation that made my hands clench into fists as I scrolled through it. These weren't just similar ideas to the modernization plan I'd spent 6 months developing last year. These were my exact recommendations, down to the specific equipment upgrade schedules and workflow improvements I'd researched and documented. The same proposals Roger had called, too, expensive and disruptive when I'd presented them 8 months ago. The same efficiency measures he'd said we weren't ready for because they required too much cultural change. Now suddenly they were brilliant innovations, because they came from a McKinsey consultant instead of the guy who'd actually built the operation. I scrolled through slide after slide of my stolen work, watching my research get rebranded as Crawford Efficiency Solutions. My cost-benefit analyses, my vendor negotiations, my safety impact assessments, all with Ashley's name in the corner and Roger's endorsement stamp at the bottom. She hadn't just taken my office and my authority, she'd stolen my ideas and was getting praised for my innovation. A yellow sticky note appeared on my wobbling desk at 4:30. My office, 5 p.m. sharp. Important strategic discussion. A C strategic discussion, right. I walked back to my former office where Ashley sat behind my old desk like she'd been there for years instead of days. She was typing on her laptop with the focused intensity of someone who thought the fate of American manufacturing depended on her quarterly efficiency metrics. "Sit," she said without looking up from her screen. I remained standing. After 22 years of building something real, I wasn't about to take orders from someone whose biggest challenge had been writing case studies about other people's work. She finally glanced up, her expression shifting from annoyance to calculated patience, like she was dealing with a difficult child who needed gentle correction. "Your operational efficiency proposal was very well received in the executive meeting today," she said, finally closing her laptop and giving me her full attention. "You mean my operational plan?" I replied evenly. Her smile never wavered. It was the kind of practiced expression they probably taught in business school seminars about managing difficult stakeholders. "Your research provided useful groundwork, certainly, but groundwork isn't architecture, Hank. I've modernized your basic concepts and elevated them into something actionable for today's competitive landscape." Actionable, modernized, elevated. The MBA buzzword hat trick. "You copied my work, word for word, in half those slides," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building in my chest. "That's a very serious accusation," she replied, setting her phone down with deliberate care. "Especially coming from someone in your current position. What's that supposed to mean?" Her expression shifted to something that might have been sympathy if it hadn't been so calculated. "Hank, people who've been at one company for extended periods often develop territorial tendencies. Roger and I discussed this during your performance review. Change can be particularly challenging for employees who've grown comfortable with legacy approaches. Legacy approaches, like safety protocols that had kept our workers alive for 2 decades, were some kind of outdated inconvenience. "Is that why you excluded me from today's department meeting?" I asked. She sighed like I was a slow student who wasn't grasping basic concepts. I needed candid feedback about operational leadership effectiveness. People aren't always comfortable speaking honestly when their former supervisor is present. Surely you understand the dynamics involved. Former supervisor. She'd already demoted me in her mind, and apparently in everyone else's too. "We're implementing a comprehensive restructuring next month," she continued, her tone shifting to what I recognized as corporate threat delivery. "Some positions will be eliminated as redundancies, others will evolve to meet new operational requirements. Your future here depends entirely on your ability to adapt to our efficiency paradigm." The message couldn't have been clearer if she'd handed me a pink slip. "Is there anything else?" I asked quietly. "Actually, yes. The Consolidated Industries quarterly assessment tomorrow. I'll be handling their presentation personally." My stomach dropped. Consolidated Industries had been my client for 12 years. Aaron Johnson, their CEO, had specifically requested me for every quarterly review since we'd started working together. Our equipment protected his workers in 3 states, and he trusted my personal oversight of their safety compliance. "Aaron specifically asked for me to present," I said. I had a very productive conversation with Aaron this morning. He understands our new strategic direction and is excited about fresh perspective on his account. She was systematically stripping away everything I'd built. My office, my authority, my client relationships, my team's respect. Each piece carefully removed like she was dismantling a machine she planned to rebuild according to her own specifications. "That's all for now," she said, her attention already back on her phone screen. I walked out past the glass-walled conference room where my department heads were still in their meeting. The conversation stopped when they saw me, 8 faces suddenly finding urgent interest in their tablets and coffee cups. Whatever Ashley had told them about me had poisoned the well completely. Back at my cramped loading dock office, I found that PIP email waiting in my inbox like a time bomb. I opened the attachment and read through the formal documentation of my alleged failures. Demonstrates resistance to necessary modernization initiatives. Exhibits territorial behavior regarding departmental transitions. Shows limited adaptability to evolving leadership requirements. Requires immediate performance intervention to maintain employment status. 22 years of 14-hour days building this operation. 22 years of mentoring young engineers, maintaining zero safety incidents, developing client relationships that had brought in $50 million in contracts, and now I was a performance problem who needed intervention. The irony wasn't lost on me. Ashley was using my own ideas to justify pushing me out, claiming I was resistant to changes I'd actually designed. I shut down my wheezing computer and headed home without saying goodbye to anyone. What was the point? They'd already written me off as yesterday's news. Sitting in my truck in the parking lot, I felt something I hadn't experienced since my early days in manufacturing when everything was still new and uncertain. Not anger exactly, but a cold clarity that cut through all the corporate bullshit like a plasma torch through steel. They thought they were watching a veteran get quietly shuffled into retirement. They expected me to take the hint, maybe negotiate a decent severance package, and disappear without making waves. They had no idea who they were dealing with. That night, instead of calling my brother to vent or opening a beer to drown my frustrations, I did something else entirely. I went to my home office and opened the file cabinet where I'd kept copies of everything for over 20 years, not because I'd planned, not for this moment specifically, but because in industrial operations, documentation isn't just good practice, it's survival. Safety protocols, compliance records, client specifications, OSHA requirements, vendor contracts, performance metrics. When you're responsible for equipment that keeps people alive, you learn to keep track of every detail that matters. What I found as I started going through those files made my hands shake. I worked through the night, cross-referencing dates, building timelines, connecting dots that formed a pattern I should have seen earlier. Ashley hadn't just stolen my ideas. She'd done this before. By 3 a.m., I had something that would make her efficiency improvements look like what they really were: a systematic dismantling of safety protocols that violated federal regulations and put workers at risk. More than that, I had documentation showing this wasn't her first time playing this game. The consulting fee she'd received from Strategic Optimization, partners 3 months before her previous plant shut down. The same firm that had acquired their equipment for pennies on the dollar when the facility failed OSHA inspection. The same parent company that now had a services contract with our corporate headquarters. Ashley wasn't just an incompetent MBA trying to make her mark. She was part of a deliberate strategy to gut manufacturing operations from the inside, create compliance failures, and enable acquisitions at distressed prices. I printed everything, organized it into a comprehensive file, and prepared for war. At 6 a.m., I showered, put on my best work clothes, and drove to the plant with a manila folder that would change everything. I arrived before the security guard, before the cleaning crew finished their rounds. The building was quiet except for the hum of machinery that never stopped, the heartbeat of American manufacturing that guys like me had spent our lives protecting. I walked to Ashley's office, my former office, and placed that folder on her desk with a simple note. For your review, OSHA compliance analysis and historical safety data. Then I left to make my rounds, checking on the overnight production run like I'd done every morning for 22 years. When I returned from my production rounds at 10:30, something had clearly exploded. People were clustered in small groups throughout the plant, conversations stopping abruptly when they spotted me. Security guards stood outside the executive wing like they were protecting a crime scene. Jennifer Walsh, our safety manager, hurried over with eyes wide enough to see white all around. Hank, what did you do? Shared some compliance documentation, I replied, keeping my voice level. Ashley ran into Roger's office screaming 25 minutes ago, she whispered, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Then legal showed up. And some people from corporate headquarters. They're all locked in the conference room now. I nodded and headed toward my loading dock office like it was any other Tuesday morning. Aren't you worried? Jennifer called after me. About what? I asked, turning back. About... She gestured helplessly toward the executive wing where you could practically see the panic radiating through the glass walls. No, I said simply. I'm not worried at all. The next 2 hours were the longest of my career. My phone stayed silent. No angry calls from Roger, no summons to explain myself, no security escort to the parking lot. Just the normal sounds of manufacturing continuing while the executive floor burned down around whatever Ashley had found in that folder. At 12:15, an email arrived from Roger's assistant. Meeting requested. Executive conference room. Immediate attendance required. The walk to the executive floor felt like walking underwater. Every face I passed showed the same mixture of curiosity and concern. Whatever was happening up there had rippled through the entire plant faster than gossip about layoffs. I found Roger seated at the head of the conference table looking like he'd aged 10 years since yesterday, flanked by Tyler Mitchell, our legal counsel, and Rachel Foster from HR. Ashley was nowhere to be seen. "Sit down, Hank," Roger said, his voice carrying a weight I'd never heard before. I took a seat directly across from him, placing my hands calmly on the table. "The file you left for Ashley this morning," he began carefully. "Where exactly did you obtain this information?" "From our company archives," I replied, "plus publicly available OSHA databases and federal compliance records." Tyler leaned forward like a prosecutor sensing weakness. "You've made extremely serious allegations about systematic safety violations and corporate fraud." "I haven't made allegations," I corrected him. "I compiled data from official sources. The patterns speak for themselves." Roger rubbed his temples like he was fighting a migraine that had been building for hours. "You're claiming that Ashley deliberately implemented cost-cutting measures that violate federal safety standards and that she's done this before at multiple facilities. The documentation supports that conclusion. Yes. That's an extraordinary accusation," Tyler interjected. "Why would anyone deliberately create safety violations that could result in criminal charges?" I met his gaze steadily. 3 months before her previous facility was shut down by OSHA, Ashley received a $200,000 consulting fee from Strategic Optimization Partners, the same firm that acquired their equipment and client contracts for 15 cents on the dollar after the facility failed federal inspection. The silence in the room was deafening. "The same parent company," I continued, "that now has a $5 million annual services contract with our corporate headquarters." Roger's face had gone pale. "You understand what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm presenting documentation of financial transactions, OSHA violation patterns, and acquisition timelines that exist on public record." Rachel cleared her throat nervously. "Ashley's claiming you fabricated this information as retaliation for the performance improvement plan." I opened my laptop and turned it toward them. "Would you like to see the original source documents? I've created hyperlinks to every federal database, every SEC filing, every OSHA report. You can verify each piece independently." Roger's phone buzzed insistently. He glanced at it and his expression shifted from concern to something approaching panic. "Wait here," he said, standing abruptly. When the door closed behind the three of them, I remained perfectly still. Through the conference room's glass walls, I could see them huddled with several people I didn't recognize, expensive suits who had corporate attorney written all over them. 45 minutes passed before Roger returned, and this time he was alone. He looked like someone who'd just been told his insurance was canceled and his house was on fire. "Ashley has been suspended pending a federal investigation," he said, collapsing into his chair like his bones had turned to jelly. "The parent company's compliance team is flying in from Chicago tonight." I see. He studied me with new eyes, like he was seeing me clearly for the first time in months. "You've been with us for 22 years, Hank." "That's correct. Why didn't you bring this to me directly when you first discovered it?" I considered my answer carefully. Would you have believed me over the efficiency expert who promised to cut operational costs by 18% while increasing productivity? His silence answered that question completely. "You authorized her to put me on a performance improvement plan after 2 decades of safety excellence," I continued. "You allowed her to dismantle protocols I'd built without any consultation with the people who actually understood their purpose. You applauded when she presented my efficiency proposals as her breakthrough innovations." He winced, like I'd hit him with a wrench. "You thought she represented the future, and I was just legacy overhead," I finished for him. "What do you want, Hank?" he asked quietly. "To make this right. What do you want?" I almost laughed. I don't want her job if that's what you're asking. Then what? I want respect, not just for me, but for every person in this plant who builds something real with their hands and their knowledge. I want leadership that values institutional wisdom alongside innovation. I want proper credit given where it's earned. Roger nodded slowly. That's more than fair. And I want Aaron Johnson's account back today, before Consolidated starts looking for a new equipment supplier. Done. I stood to leave, but Roger stopped me with a question that had been building all morning. The file you compiled, how long were you working on it? I wasn't working on it at all, I replied. I just pay attention to details that matter. I always have. As I walked back to my loading dock office, my phone started, buzzing with messages from department heads who'd suddenly remembered I existed. I ignored them all. At my wobbling desk, Brad was waiting with a look I hadn't seen in weeks, something that might have been hope mixed with shame. Security just finished packing Ashley's office, he said quietly, and there's a team from the FBI downloading her computer files. FBI? Federal investigation into corporate fraud and safety violations. That's what Jennifer heard from Tyler's assistant. I nodded and started organizing the backup documentation I'd kept at my desk. If the feds were involved, they'd want everything I had. Hank, Brad said, his voice carrying the weight of 3 weeks of regret. We should have backed you from the beginning. You did what you thought was right, I replied. That's all anyone can do. But we both knew that wasn't entirely true. Sometimes doing what's right means standing up when it's uncomfortable, not waiting until it's safe. By evening, Ashley's nameplate had disappeared from the company directory. Her office, my former office, sat empty, the efficiency flowcharts already stripped from the walls like they'd never existed. The glass desk was gone too, replaced by nothing. Just empty space where her optimization empire had briefly flourished. At home that night, I poured myself a bourbon and finally allowed myself to process what had happened. My hands shook slightly as the adrenaline from the day wore off, replaced by something I couldn't quite name. Not satisfaction exactly, but relief, like I'd been holding my breath for 3 weeks and could finally exhale. My phone rang around 8 p.m. Unknown number. Is this Howard Brennan? Yes. This is Nicole Anderson, chairperson of the Federal Compliance Oversight Committee. I'd like to discuss your findings in person tomorrow morning. My stomach tightened. This wasn't over yet. Of course. I should inform you that Miss Crawford has retained legal counsel. She's claiming wrongful termination and defamation, alleging you fabricated evidence due to personal grievances. There it was, the counterattack I'd been expecting. I understand, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Her legal team is also questioning your methods and motives. We'll need to examine this thoroughly. In the meantime, I've instructed Mr. Martinez to place you on administrative leave during the investigation. The room seemed to tilt. Administrative leave, the same status as Ashley. In one swift move, they'd equalized us again, accuser and accused. Standard procedure, she continued. We need to ensure there's no perception of conflict while we review both sides. Both sides. Like this was some workplace personality dispute instead of documented federal violations. After hanging up, I sat motionless for a long time, staring at the wall. Administrative leave meant I couldn't access my files, couldn't speak to my team, couldn't defend my findings. It was corporate purgatory, guilty until proven innocent. My doorbell rang at 9:30, startling me out of my brooding. Through the window, I saw Brad shifting nervously on my front porch. I should have stood up for you from day one, he said when I opened the door. We all should have. I let him in without comment. Is it true, he asked, following me to the kitchen, about Ashley systematically violating safety protocols? You tell me, I replied. You worked with her new efficiency standards. Did anything seem off about the equipment inspection intervals she mandated? He looked down at his boots. They were below OSHA minimums. I tried to tell her, but she said you'd made us too cautious, too comfortable with excessive safety margins. And what did you think? He hesitated. I thought maybe she was right, that maybe we had gotten too conservative, too set in our ways. His honesty stung, but I appreciated it. The Oversight Committee's coming tomorrow, I told him. I'm on administrative leave, same as Ashley. His eyes widened. That's insane, after what you uncovered. That's corporate politics, her word against mine. But the evidence, Evidence can be interpreted different ways, especially when expensive lawyers get involved. Brad's expression hardened. Tell me what to do. How can I help? I studied his face, seeing genuine regret mixed with determination. He'd abandoned me when Ashley arrived, but he'd also been the first to come back when things got real. Why did you come here tonight, Brad? Because I was wrong. Because we all were. And because I've worked with you for 8 years. I know who you really are. The Oversight Committee meeting the next morning filled our largest conference room. When I arrived, I found not just Nicole Anderson and the executives, but nearly 20 people, including Brad, Jennifer, Tony, and most of my former team. Nicole, a sharp-featured woman in her 60s, got straight to business. Mr. Brennan, we've reviewed your documentation regarding Ashley Crawford. Her legal representation has provided a response claiming you misrepresented data to create a false narrative motivated by personal retaliation. Beside her sat a polished lawyer in a $5,000 suit who smiled at me like he was already counting his billable hours. Furthermore, Nicole continued, they've submitted counter-evidence suggesting you've been resistant to necessary modernization and have attempted to undermine legitimate efficiency improvements. The lawyer slid a document across the table. Another resignation letter, pre-written and ready for my signature. Before we proceed, Nicole said, Ms. Crawford has offered to withdraw all legal action if you retract your allegations and accept immediate retirement with a generous severance package. The room went dead silent. All eyes on me. I picked up the resignation letter, scanning the corporate language that would erase 22 years of building something real. Then I set it back down. I won't be signing this, I said simply. The lawyer's practiced smile faltered. I strongly advise you to reconsider. Our evidence package is quite substantial. I look forward to reviewing it, I replied. All of it. Nicole nodded to an assistant who distributed thick folders around the table. I opened mine to find emails taken out of context, performance metrics selectively presented, statements from interviews that had clearly been heavily edited. As you can see, the lawyer said, we've documented a clear pattern of resistance and territorial behavior that predates our client's arrival. I flipped through the pages slowly, then reached into my briefcase and pulled out my own set of folders. What's this? Nicole asked as I passed them around. Context, I said simply. The room fell silent as they read. I'd spent the previous evening preparing these with Jennifer's help. Complete email chains showing Ashley's selective editing, full performance data demonstrating our department's consistent excellence, and most importantly, signed statements from workers who had come forward after word spread about the investigation. She told me Hank was being transitioned to an advisory role, Jennifer read aloud from her statement, that I should distance myself professionally if I wanted to advance under new leadership. Tony nodded grimly. Same here. Said there were performance issues with Hank that she couldn't discuss, but we should align ourselves with the new direction. She recorded our conversations, Brad added. Had her phone out during every meeting, said it was for documentation purposes, made us all paranoid about what we said. The lawyer's face had gone red. These statements are clearly coerced. They're notarized, I cut in, each one given freely with independent witnesses. Nicole was studying the folders intently. This provides important context, but it still doesn't address the core allegation that your safety violation claims are fabricated. No, it doesn't, I agreed. For that, we need independent verification. I stood and walked to the door, opening it to reveal a weathered man in his 50s wearing a visitor badge. This is Cameron Wells, I said, former plant manager at Ashley's previous facility. The lawyer jumped to his feet. This is highly irregular. We weren't informed of additional witnesses. Cameron took a seat beside me, his expression grim. I was terminated 2 months before our plant was shut down by OSHA after raising concerns about safety protocol changes. When Hank contacted me yesterday with the patterns he'd identified, I recognized them immediately. Nicole leaned forward. Mr. Wells, are you prepared to testify that Ashley Crawford deliberately implemented policies that led to safety violations? I'm prepared to state that the efficiency measures she advocated for were identical to the ones that resulted in our facility's federal shutdown, despite multiple warnings about regulatory compliance, and that she received substantial compensation from strategic optimization partners immediately before our closure. The energy in the room shifted completely. Roger, who had been silent until now, turned to Nicole with something approaching panic. We need our full legal compliance team involved immediately. The expensive lawyer was texting furiously. My client categorically rejects these baseless accusations. Cameron smiled grimly. Actually, I have complete documentation of the timeline, the safety violations, and the financial transactions, already provided to the federal investigators this morning. Nicole closed her folder with finality. Then we'll proceed with the full investigation. Mr. Wells, we'll need your formal cooperation with the federal inquiry. Already arranged, he replied. As people filed out, I remained seated. This wasn't complete victory. Investigations could still be influenced, evidence could still be challenged. But it was justice beginning to work the way it was supposed to. Nicole approached me as the room emptied. 22 years at one company is rare in today's economy. Building something real takes time, I replied. It does indeed. She gathered her papers. You'll remain on administrative leave during the federal investigation, but with full pay and benefits. And Mr. Brennan, the preliminary evidence suggests your findings were not only accurate but understated the scope of the violations. 6 weeks later, Ashley faced federal charges for systematic safety fraud across multiple facilities. Strategic Optimization Partners was under investigation in 4 states. The consulting scheme had been operating for over 3 years, deliberately creating compliance failures to enable hostile acquisitions. As for me, I got more than my office back. Roger offered me Chief Safety Officer for the entire company, with oversight across all manufacturing divisions. My first initiative was implementing the efficiency improvements I'd originally designed, the real ones, with proper safety protocols intact. 3 months after that, Aaron Johnson from Consolidated Industries called personally to thank me for the safety upgrades that had prevented a serious accident at their Memphis facility. Your protocols saved lives, Hank, he said. That's why we stick with people we trust. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's being so good at what you do that their schemes collapse under the weight of their own deception while you keep building something that matters. The day I moved back into my real office, Tony stopped by with something I'd never seen before, a smile that reached his eyes. Good to have you back where you belong, Hank, he said. And for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Not because someone gave me permission, but because I'd earned it. One safety protocol at a time, one relationship at a time, one worker kept safe at a time. That's all any of us really want. To do good work and have it matter. To build something real that lasts longer than quarterly earnings reports and efficiency initiatives. To be respected not for the degrees on our wall, but for the lives we've protected and the things we've built with our own hands and knowledge. And sometimes, if you're patient enough and thorough enough and you never stop paying attention to what really matters, that's exactly what you get. In the end, documentation beats manipulation every time. Keep records, pay attention to patterns, and never underestimate the power of institutional knowledge built over decades. Real respect isn't given by titles or corner offices. It's earned through consistent results, worker safety, and the trust that comes from doing the right thing when no one's watching.